Hello friends, my name is Koolio and welcome back to the channel. Today guys, I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 heroes that you should be re-rolling for in Langrisser M. Now the game should be relaunching in a couple of weeks, so I decided to do a lot of research. I went to like crazy websites, Chinese forums to try to find out the best heroes for us to be summoning when the game officially launches. Now just a little bit of a disclosure, all of the content, all the information I got were for the Chinese version of the game, so things might be slightly different for the English release of the game. So I've also tried my best to translate a lot of the information over from Chinese to English and to present that to you in a better way of understanding as opposed to what it is when you just basically use Google Translate. So I'm going to go through and kind of show you the benefits of each of the heroes, some of the best things that they're good at, their class trees, their stats, and their talent. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Ledin. Now Ledin starts off as a fighter. He can branch off into either a general, paladin, or gladiator, with the paladin branching off into a templar and the gladiator branching off into a king. Now for his base stats, he's got an HP starting stat of 384, which is one of the highest in the game, followed by an intelligence starting at 26, then magic defense at 24, and attack at 47. Now that attack is somewhere around 5th or 6th place for the best attack in the game, and then his defense at 30, I believe, ties for the 2nd place or 1st place for highest defense in the game, and then his dexterity at 34. Now Ledin's talent is called the Will of King. What happens is he has a base 5% damage reduction across the board. Now I don't know if that's for all of the heroes on your team or if it's just specifically for him. We'll have to figure that out when the game officially launches in English. Now if his life, if the hero's life, not his soldier's life, but specifically just his life, is more than or equal to 100% when engaged in battle by a melee attack, he gains an extra attack that turn, which allows him to use that attack, that benefit, to be able to do an additional set of damage to an enemy. Now, the next hero that we're going to talk about is Leon, which I just summoned in my Chinese version of the game, and I've been super pumped to use him. Now, he starts off as a knight that can branch off into a Grand Knight, a Highlander, or a Swordsman, with the Grand Knight branching down to a Strike Master and the Highlander branching down to a Royal Knight. Now for his base stats, he's got an HP starting at 343, an intellect at 23, a magical defense at 23, an attack at 55, which is, I believe, the highest in the game, possibly tied for another hero, a defense at 27, and a dexterity at 28. Now for his talent, it's called Legendary Knight. Now for every 1 tile of movement that he moves, his damage is increased by 1% and his defense is increased by 5%. Now after he attacks, he can move an additional 3 tiles. So for Leon, I believe there's no cap to how much this ability can work, so you're going to want to move him constantly all over the battlefield, attack, move out of the way, because the more and more you move this character, the higher his damage and the higher his defense. Specifically his defense can become absolutely ridiculous. Now the next one we're going to talk about is Diehard. Now it specifically classes him as a knight, but most of the forums and stuff that I followed kind of categorizes him as an assassin type character. Now he does start off as a knight and become either a raider, a Highlander, or a swordsman, with the raider branching down into a high master and the Highlander breaking down into a royal knight. Now his HP starts off at 330, his intellect base stat is 22, his magical defense base stat at 23, his attack at 54. However, with his talent, he's known as one of the highest damage dealers in the game, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. His defense is at 27 and his dexterity at 30. Now with his talent, this is where a lot of his damage comes in. He's actually probably known as the highest damage dealer in the game. Now his base crit rate is increased by 10% right off the bat, and now after killing an enemy, Diehard triggers a smoke effect which reduces all damage by 30% for 1 turn. However, this effect can only be triggered after every 3 rounds of intervals before triggering again. Now with his increased crit rate of 10%, if you equip him with the right weapons, armor, and everything, you can get his crit rate extremely high, and he is just critting all over the place. So even though his attack rate is slightly lower than some other heroes, due to that talent effect of increasing his crit rate, he does an insane amount of damage, and you can kind of charge him into the enemy's attack, and then if you end up killing an enemy, giving him that extra defense of that damage reduction of 30%, so he can kind of jump in, attack, and then hopefully be able to jump back out, and if he can't, then he's got that, you know, that increased defense on top of him. So, alright, on to the next hero, we've got Leona. Now with Luna, she starts off as a Pegasus Knight, which can branch down into a Bow Knight, a Pegasus Lord, or a Unicorn Knight, with the Bow Knight branching down into a Bow Master, and the Pegasus Lord breaking down into a Pegasus Master. Now for her base stats, she has 372 HP, Intelligence starts off at 34, Magical Defense at 32, Attack at 48, which is pretty high, Defense at 29, and Dexterity starting around 33. Now for her talent ability, it's called the Guardian of the Wind. Now, right off the bat, Luna's magical defense is increased by 10%, and two nearby allies have incoming magical damage reduced by 15%. So if you find yourself in PvP and you've got enemies with really high magical attack damage, she is an absolutely fantastic character to bring into the mix to defend your characters, especially your weaker ones, or maybe even some of your tanks that don't have the higher magical damage, because it gives that 50% magical damage reduction on top of the magical defense increase that she already has. So she is really, really good to support some of your frontline characters that don't really have a lot of those that magical defense, because there are a lot of mages in the game that have really powerful attack damage and are really good for PvP, but there aren't a whole lot of characters that have increased magical defense. So Luna is a fantastic character to have on the team. Alright, the next one is Leona. She's probably the best healer in the game. She starts off as a sister, and then she can branch into either a bishop, priest, or summoner, and then the priest can branch down into a prophet. Now for her base stats, she has a base stat of 321 for HP, 38 for intellect, 34 for magical defense, 35 for attack, 24 for defense, and 18 for dexterity. Now she has really low dexterity, so you're going to want to be careful with her, because she has lower defense, lower magical defense, so you're going to want to try to not get her into the middle of the battle, but to kind of step back behind defenders, maybe add a defender next to her just to make sure that she doesn't die. Now, her talent ability is called Holy Cleric. Now, at the end of her turn, all allies within one tile of Leona have any debuffs dispelled, and they are also healed. Now, the amount of healing they receive is 1.5 times their own intelligence, which is absolutely insane. Not only does she have abilities to heal up the characters, but her talent, if she's around defenders, specifically defenders, they're going to be constantly getting healing every single turn and removing debuffs. Now, I played a game just the other day where there were monsters that kept debuffing my attack, and it was making it extremely hard for me to take down. I believe it was the Dragon Trials. And if I would have had her on my team, it would have made things so much easier, because I kept getting my attack debuffed. So she is like a must character to have on your team, especially for PvP, because she is a fantastic support character. Next up, we've got Bernhardt. Now, Bernhardt starts off as a fighter and can branch into a gladiator, swordsman, or general, with the gladiator branching down into a brave, and the swordsman breaking down into an emperor. Now, for his base stats, he's got a base stat HP of 384, one of the highest in the game, an intellect base stat of 25, magical defense at 22, attack at 49, probably like third highest in the game, defense at 30, tied for second or first, and then dexterity at 33. Now, his talent ability is called the Will of the Tyrant. Now, when entering battle, damage is increased by 10%. Like, his overall damage that he does when he enters into a battle is increased by 10%, and all enemy attacks within 2 squares are reduced by 5%. So he's a really great tank character, really great warrior character to kind of get into the midst of the battle, and having like a support character just behind him is fantastic, just in case you've got an assassin or someone kind of going around him, because he's got that 2 squares of reduced damage by 5%. 2 squares is quite a lot. It branches out pretty far instead of a 1 square around him. So Bernhardt is a fantastic warrior slash defense character that you're going to want to have on your team. Next up, we've got our first mage, and that is Bosal. Now, Bosal starts off as a mage and can branch into either a Reaper, a Dark Mage, or a Summoner, with the Reaper branching off into a Death Lord, which is like the sickest class name ever, and the Dark Mage branching off into a Dark Prince. Now, for his base stats, he's got an HP of 296, an intelligence of 44, which is the highest in the game, I believe, a magical defense of 32, an attack of 29, a defense of 24, and a dexterity at 21. Now, where he really comes into power is with his talent ability called Millennium Evil. Now, it reduces enemy intelligence by 1.5 times his own magical defense while causing damage to the enemy. There is also a 50% chance of applying a random debuff to the enemy. So that is anytime he does damage to an enemy, and I believe he's got some really powerful area of effect damage abilities as well. So if you're constantly throwing down area of effect abilities to the enemy, anyone that's hit, there is a 50% chance of applying a random debuff to the enemy, which honestly, once those begin to stack, it becomes absolutely crazy. And because it's a random debuff, they can get attack debuffs, they can get speed debuffs, they can get defense debuffs. There's a lot of stuff. This guy is absolutely fantastic in PvP, especially if the enemies kind of grouping up together and you can just destroy enemies, debuffing them, taking away their own intelligence. It is like, he is a really powerful mage and is a must character to have on any PvP team. Next up, we got Altamüller. Now, Altamüller starts off as a Hawk Knight, which can branch off into a General, a Dragon Knight, or a Highlander, with the General becoming a Grand Marshal and the Dragon Knight branching down into a Dragon Master. Now, his HP is at 335 for the base stat, intelligence at 27, magical defense at 30, attack at 55, which is tied for the highest in the game, defense at 28, and dexterity at 40, which I believe is either first or second for the highest in the game. He's got really, really high movement and can go all over the battlefield. Now, it says that each time that Altamüller enters battle for his talent ability called Unparalleled Lord, or Unparalleled Overlord, his attack is increased by 3% and his physical damage received is reduced by 2% for the next 3 rounds. With this effect can be stacked up to 3 times. So he is a character that you're going to want to have him charge almost directly into battle, surrounding himself with enemies, allowing them to attack him, because every time he is engaged in battle, he gets increased attack and increased defense. So moving him into the middle of the battle, because it only lasts for 3 rounds, you're going to want to try to keep it stacked as long as possible. And if you get hit 3 times in 1 round, you've essentially got a 9% increase to his attack and a 6% increase to his damage reduction. So those boosts, along with his weapons and his armor, make him a really heavy attacker and movement character to just get right into the fray of battle and take on as many characters as possible. And every attack that happens against him, he just becomes more and more powerful and stronger. Okay, the next one we have is Elwin. Now, Elwin starts off as a fighter, which can branch into a Highlander, a swordsman, or a general, with the swordsman branching down into a hero and the general branching down into a grand marshal. Now, for his base stats, he's got an HP of 373, an intellect of 25, magical defense at 23, attack at 50, defense at 29, and dexterity at 35, with his talent called the Will of the Brave. Now, when Elwin enters a battle, his damage is increased by 10%, and after the battle, there is a 40% chance that Elwin will return to life. Now, the amount of health he returns with is 30% of the total damage caused by the hero. Now, this is a character that is like another character that you're going to want to jump right in the middle of the fray and kind of use him as a little bit of like fodder. Like, if he ends up dying, it's okay, because you've got that 40% chance of him returning back to life with a lot of HP along with him. Now, I've got a character similar to this named Vargas on my team, but he's not nearly as good as Elwin. He has a similar ability where he gets resurrected, and let me tell you, that resurrection ability is extremely powerful. Like hands down, if you've got a character that resurrects, it essentially gives them another round. Trust me, I've seen it in action. It's a great talent. Okay, now for the last hero on the list, we've got Sherri. Now, Sherri starts off as a Hawk Knight, which can branch into a Pegasus Lord, a Dragon Knight, or a Raider, with the Dragon Knight branching down into a Dragon Master, and the Raider branching down into a High Master. Now, with her base stats, she's got an HP base stat of 333, intellect of 22, magical defense of 28, and attack at 56, which is the highest in the game. I'm like 100% sure that's the highest in the game. However, it doesn't mean she's the highest damage dealer, as there are other characters that like Diehard that ends up doing a lot more damage due to, increased crit rate. But she has a defense of 27 and a dexterity of 44. Now, with that attack and her dexterity, she's kind of like an assassin type character. She can move all over the battlefield and do quick damaging strikes against enemies, and then she can back out of there. Now, with her talent ability is called Falling Princess. Now, when Sherri has lost all of her soldiers, any incoming damage is reduced by 10%, because they essentially add that onto her, because she's a character that you're going to want to charge into the middle of battle, and because she's doing that, her defense and her magical defense aren't super high. She's probably going to lose her soldiers fairly quickly, so having that talent right there just helps reduce any damage coming into her hero life. Now, after she kills an enemy, Sherri can take one additional action this turn but however, this effect requires 4 rounds to trigger again. So she's essentially a character that can jump in, attack, and then she can take an extra action, which I believe she can either attack or move out of the way, which it's crazy. She can jump in, attack, jump out. She's a character that's just going to be moving all over the place, and it's going to probably be pretty hard for people to kill, especially with that 10% reduction to her hero life. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Langrisser M videos coming in the future. I'll see you later, my friends.